Song Revolution with John Chisholm on the NRT Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, John here. Welcome to Song Revolution. It's always a joy to have you here. You're the reason that we do this show. My guest this week is Jason Gray. I hope you know Jason's work. He's a very popular CCM artist. He's on the Centricity music label. This guy is amazing. He was one of the first interviews that I did here on Song Revolution 4 years ago when we first started. Deeply vulnerable, talked about some very deep things in that interview. If you haven't heard that one, go back. It's totally worth the listen and the time. And this time is no different. He is just wide open. We talk about some really deep personal things and the challenges of faith, the challenges of what he does, the challenges of making music. And this is a great episode that I think you are going to really enjoy. If you're not familiar with Jason's music, go check him out. I think you're going to be amazed at what this guy is all about. So, hey, again, thanks for being here. Let's check out Jason Gray. Jason, man, thanks for coming by the studio today. It's good to see you, man.
Thank you for having me again. It's been a while, and I feel like you're, I'm not sure who's doing who a favor here. I know that you had me booked for an event that I double booked on and had to back out at the last moment, and I'm so bummed that I had to do. I think I've only had to do that like 2 times in my career, and you were one of them.
That's right. I'm mad at you.
I know exactly right. Yeah, I wanted to bring that up, so we could.
Thanks for reminding me. I have a little bone to pick with you, bro. I said, well, hey, anyway, I can make it up to you. I'll be on the show again. Anything I can do, So hopefully this helps in that way. But I also felt forgiven that you'd be willing to have me back on the show. Oh my gosh! You know what? The fact that I've forgotten about it. Now I'm gonna have to go back and look at my calendar and figure out why I'm mad at you. So, no, man. You know what?
Good to be back here.
4 years ago, I think it was. You were among the first handful of podcasts that we did, and now these years later we have so many shows, but yours has always stood out to me because of just the depth of honesty and transparency. You told a story about the night you nearly took your life, and you were very transparent and open, and I hope that didn't cause a vulnerability hangover. But I don't know, how do you share that story openly, or is it just
I think I've talked about it before. I mean, I wrote a song about it. I mean, it was couched in enough ambiguous language that I don't think you'd know that's what the song was about unless you'd had a similar experience and could also speak that language, But I try to be open as much as I can. That it's how can people see what the grace of God looks like in a real person's life unless we, are open about what real life looks like, and at the same time also, you don't want to bleed on anybody. I remember seeing one of my heroes, Walt Wongren Jr.
Awesome author.
Yeah. He's great, right? And he spoke about how you want to wait until a chapter closes before you share about it. Well, because I'd asked him about it because I had some contempt for the church culture where you'd only hear people speak about their testimonies after they've already, had some kind of victory in their life. So what they struggled with was always in the past. And why don't we talk about what we're struggling with right this moment, And I was a little up on my high horse about it, and he said, well, it's good to wait until a chapter has closed before you talk about it, because if it's still open, you won't realize it, but you're asking something from the audience. You're asking them to be on your side or to support you or to show you grace, Whereas if you wait until a chapter is closed, then you actually have something to give to the audience. And I thought that was a great
That's brilliant
insight and help me to be less self-righteously indignant, But yeah, so I'm pretty open about things. If the chapter has closed on them, then I want to be as forthrightly open as possible.
Yeah.
But
And it's so popular these days, especially from people who are not professionally in Christian music. It's so popular for people to take pot shots at contemporary Christian music and K-Love radio
sure,
and positive and uplifting and all of that. And anytime anyone does that in my presence, I say, well, you must not have ever heard Jason Gray.
Oh,
Because you're my poster child
that's
for
good to say.
depth and sincerity, authenticity. Just, I mean, they're so beautiful. The depth of your theology and philosophical musings are so deeply couched in your art that some people would just go around singing la 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 la, but not realize how deep that song even is. And you don't have to get to Death Without a Funeral or Honesty. You don't have to get to those songs to feel depth if you pay attention.
Yeah.
And so, man, you're a standout to me in that way. Of course, there are other great artists that I think have a lot of depth.
Yep, I agree.
So Christian music just gets a bad rap sometimes.
I try to write songs, especially the pop songs, the ones that are aimed at radio, to have multiple points of entry, So like if you just want to have a fun pop song that you can kind of sing along with, hopefully the song works there. If you want a song where you can engage deeply with and allow it to read your mail, the song hopefully works on that level too. If you're broken, hopefully it works. If you're full of hope and praise, hopefully the song works. So I think about Van Gogh. He did a painting. I think it's called and I should explain to people who might be hearing this, I do have a speech handicap, so it's not because John is making me nervous, although he is very intimidating, but no, it's just what I do. So, but Van Gogh had a painting called the Church at Auvers. I think that's what it's called. But what was interesting about the painting of the church is that there were no doors on it. There was no way in, and I think that painting demonstrated, what he felt about the church, that it was a sacred place that he couldn't find a way into, And so when I write a song, I think about that painting a lot, and I try to write songs that have all kinds of doors all around them, you know what I mean? So that you don't feel barred out, So like I've been in church when I'm going through a really, really difficult, painful thing, and there's this happy praise song happening that feels like it's a bouncer that keeps me out of the moment, you know what I mean? Like, wow, I'm not there, and singing this song makes me feel alienated, And
what do you mean by that? Can you take us a little deeper into
well,
that?
I mean, like, have you ever, like, had the experience where you're going through some kind of hell, and you go to church, and there's this really happy, positive praise song going on that you're like, that I'm not there at all. Like I can't relate to this. And so therefore I feel like I'm on the outside of it, and it's like a bouncer at the door.
Okay.
That
now
keeps
I'm with
me out.
you.
You know what I mean? But I want to write happy, positive up songs too, but I want to make sure that in some way that I've built a door, at least in the back, so that even if you're profoundly broken, the song doesn't remind you of how alone you are. There's still a way in. That's what I hope happens anyway. So
we need those songs. We need the celebration songs.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You have a celebration song.
Yeah, church. It's not completely unlike a family situation, right? And even in a family, maybe especially in a family is where you can experience the deepest kinds of wounds and trauma, and then, and then you just kind of learn how to be, like, okay, we're not going to bring this topic up at Thanksgiving because
don't talk to Aunt Judy.
Right. And I think we can have the same kind of experiences in church, right? Where and to the point where if you have enough conflict and drama, you don't want to go to Thanksgiving anymore
At all, yeah.
You go out of a sense of duty and you're braced the whole time and you can't be your authentic self. And I mean, church can be like that too, especially like, I think about there's all kinds of talk in our culture right now bemoaning cancel culture. And I even hear a lot of that coming from conservatives and from religious people, saying this is a problem, cancel culture. And I agree. At the same time, I think, well, man, the church kind of perfected, cancel culture.
You did not just say that.
Over the last 50 years or
you
or
did
longer.
not just
or
say that. Oh my gosh, it's so
right?
true.
You know what I mean?
Really.
I mean, like if you don't align theologically, if you have some kind of a public failure, and it's interesting too. Like some failures get a pass, some we fixate on. I've been thinking a lot about how fixated the church seems to be on sexual conduct, and that gets all the headlines. But we, are we also talking about overeating or being manipulative, or the greatest sin of all, in my opinion, self-righteousness? It's just interesting the things that religious culture fixates on, and also what it ignores, Anyway, I don't know where I was going with all that, but
it's the cancel culture of the church.
Yeah, and so is the church a safe place for me to speak openly about what I'm struggling with, and yes and no, right?
I think that for me, my faith, gosh, I'm going to out myself again here.
There we go.
I've been deconstructed over the last 7 years.
Yeah.
And I think I'm coming out in a different place now. People like Brian McLaren and Richard Rohr and those type writers.
You're going to get canceled for sure.
I'm going to get canceled. I know we're going to lose a bunch of song revolutioners, but no, don't go, you guys. We're still good people, but it's just a whole different thing. And I've even started, as I was telling you before we started the show here, that I've even started a different podcast and a different brand, johnchisholm.com. We're putting in a bunch of plugs for that, but it's like I want to have a broader conversation. I don't really want to be confined any longer to just the narrow confines of, if you don't say it the way that we've always said it in the evangelical world, then you're going to hell. You're wrong. You're not one of us if you're not on the reservation anymore. And I've always been drawn to the Catholic writers, Henry Nouwen, Buechner, Manning, those guys. And they were all really super broken people. Yeah. I mean, Manning, my God, he smoked cigarettes,
and was an alcoholic. I don't know if you read his last book, All Is Grace. It was just one of the most brave books I've ever read, because, his books were these beautiful missives on the furious love of God, the bottomless, unfailing grace of God. And then in the last book, you realize, that's why he wrote about that, because he needed that so much. He outed himself, just like saying, here's what was going on when I wrote his books. Here's how bad it was. I missed my mom's funeral because I was passed out drunk in the hotel room, Gosh. And I remember reading Yancey's foreword to the book, and he said, you can read this book and be angry with Brennan that like how could you have been this way in your private life and write these books, or you can see that that's why Brennan wrote so passionately about these things, that it was his brokenness that put him in contact with the beautiful grace of God,
Abba's child, the cry of the heart for intimate belonging. You can't write that stuff if you haven't been so, I don't know, not deprived of it, been longing for it or seeking it and trying to find that. And that was a real pivotal point for me, was reading that book and feeling that a deeper intimacy with Christ through that book. And we're so unaccepting.
Yeah, well, it's I think the temptation. Okay, I'm not going to pin this on the church. I think this is a human problem, and we've brought some of that human problem into some of our church culture, and it can look like this: that we come into faith because we have some moment where we are so aware of our sinfulness and the need of God's grace, and then we set about trying to become people who don't need God's grace anymore. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And that's just, and that's again, that speaks to what I think is the sin underneath all other sins is self-righteousness, that need to be right and to feel like I'm right, because if I feel like I'm right, then I can feel like secure in the world. I feel like I have a place to stand in the world,
and not need God.
And not, I know.
Need God.
I was having, or at least to not have a need for the authentic God, right? Instead, we come up with a God of our own making. I was having a conversation with a guy this morning, an artist named Mankato, and he was speaking about his own journey of deconstruction, and some of the language that he had around that is he goes, I used to believe in a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, and I call him Dale now, and I love Dale. I mean, he was a cool guy and just, very pleasant to be around, and I thought, I loved Dale too. That's great. But eventually, at some point, you have to recognize, that's not Jesus, that's Dale, and if I want the real Jesus, I have to
right.
Thank Dale for his time in my life, but it's time for me to move on now. But deconstruction is so interesting because it's this buzzword now that gets people up in arms, and people are nervous about it. You've got pastors and CCM artists speaking very strongly against it. There's a CCM artist who said, if you're deconstructing, shut up. We don't want to hear from you, and that's just not helpful. If you look up the word deconstruction, I understand that it can be like a scary word because it sounds like demolition, right?
And it's a scary experience.
It's a scary experience too. But when I look up the word, sorry, I had it looked up because I wondered if we would talk about this, and it went away. Deconstruction. It says it is the analytic examination of something, such as a theory, often in order to reveal its inadequacy. I don't think that has to be scary. I can understand why that is scary because it's going after the structure that people have built their lives on, and it's shaking that structure to see what's firm and what's not firm. And if you're a person who likes the security of the structure that your life is built on, that's scary. But if you're a person who loves truth wherever it's going to take you, then I think it can be invigorating, right? And Jesus himself was the great deconstructionist. Every time he would say, you've heard it said, but I say. That's what he was doing, right? He was saying, let's re-examine this, and in our re-examination of it, let's get a little closer to the truth, And you mentioned Richard Rohr. One of my favorite quotes of his is he says, it's this idea of send but include, and that means, like if I grew up evangelical, and I'm growing out of that or something like that, it doesn't mean that I have contempt for all those experiences I had. Okay, it means I don't have contempt for Dale, right?
Yeah. We don't hate Dale.
I'm transcending him, but I'm including him. I'm keeping it because Dale, I held hands with him, and he walked me to where I am now, where I realized, oh man, Dale, you're great, but I think there's more to Jesus than this idea that I've had about you, There's a quote by Jordan Peterson. He says, you can love what you know, or you can love what you don't know. And there's a lot more that you don't know, so be careful what you fall in love with. And the idea is that if I love what I already know, then I'm not going to learn anything new.
Don't you think the fear, though, is that we'll transcend too far and we'll go off into
slippery
New Age
slope,
or Satanism or some kind of bizarre, sacrificing goats and weird stuff?
Or just becoming liberal.
Right.
Yeah,
too progressive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a real thing. I remember, I've worked with a number of Christian organizations over the years who have talked about ideological drift. That if you're not careful, the thing that you started out as, you will drift away from it. And so I get that. I think that's a real thing. On the other hand, I also think that it's very often, to me, and this is anecdotal evidence, but it seems to me that so many of the people who are the most afraid of the slippery slope of being open to new ideas and all that kind of stuff, they also tend to be the ones who speak about the sovereignty of God, and which, by the way, is the God who said, I am the author and finisher of your faith. So either we believe that or we don't, right? And if I trust that God is the author and the finisher of my faith, then I can be less anxious about slipping into some kind of,
He's got this, yeah.
Or he's got me, right? And maybe maybe there's a bit of naivety to it, but I think there's also a bit of truth to it too, But if the way that we fundamentally bring ourselves to the world and to the church and to God and to each other is out of fear that at any moment I could fall away, that doesn't seem conducive to genuine growth, right? It's so infected with anxiety and fear. But so I try to be curious, trusting that the one who began a good work in me will be faithful to bring it to completion, while also continually asking the Holy Spirit to help me. And okay, so here's a thought I have about that, since you asked, is I think there's a value in cultivating a ruthless self-suspicion. And for me, what that looks like is there's a personality profiling test out there. It's called Ocean, or it's also called the Big Five, and that's because it measures you along the spectrums of openness. How open are you? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So what's really interesting about that is as you dig into that a bit, you discover that people who tend to score high on openness tend to be more ideologically liberal. People who score higher in conscientiousness, orderliness, tend to be more conservative. Now, the idea is that we need both of them. We need, because open people are the innovators. They're usually entrepreneurs. They have all kinds of ideas, and they start new things, but also because they don't have as much orderliness in them, then, more orderly conservative people have to come behind them and build the structure so that their new idea can flourish.
You're describing my whole life. Right?
Yeah, right. And so when you understand that, then that, like all of this stuff that's happening now in the culture wars, as I see it, is a failure to recognize the value that the person across the aisle has, and the peace that they bring that I need. Like if I'm super conservative, I need to be suspicious of that, right? And I need an open, progressive person to update me. Likewise, if I'm high in openness, I need to be suspicious of that and recognize, that conservative, or I need them in my life, or I'm just going to create chaos everywhere I go. If you voted for Trump, it would do you well to be suspicious about your orderliness and the way that you feel about more creative people high in openness. If you voted for Biden, then it would do you well to be suspicious of, how open am I? It's great that I'm open, but am I too open? Do I have some impulse in me that hates any kind of structure because I'm afraid it's going to get oppressive? And so we just have to we have to deconstruct our own self-righteousness, right? And anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Well, I think earlier you were talking about things being shaken, and everything that you believed in being shaken. And I've experienced that in my own life when my local church ministry was coming to an end, really, when I was transitioning out for whatever reasons, good or bad.
Yeah.
I look back and I'm very grateful because I wouldn't be able to influence the way I can now through this show and through what we're doing. I mean, my audience is many, many, many times, many thousands of times greater now than what I was involved with. But yet that was everything to me. That's what I knew. That's what I trusted in, as well as, just being in a different season of life where I look back and I think, I really value so much of it, but how much of Christian culture have I trusted in that really is more Dale than Jesus?
Right,
and so, and so it seems to me like a lot of I bristle when I hear people just bandying about Christian slogans that really aren't based in Scripture and aren't based, at least not in my lived experience.
Right.
And I've lived a few decades, so I've the reason I love Brian McLaren's work, Faith After Doubt, is that it really kind of helped me see that there was still a whole lot of value in my deepest heart level faith in Christ, no matter how it's lived out. If I live it out as a Roman Catholic or as an evangelical or as an Episcopalian or whatever, and because of the music thing, I think I've been everything except Mormon and Roman Catholic. So it is like we've done everything because music is so plug and play. But I've been everything from Baptist to charismatic to Episcopalian to Reformed. I've worked in all those contexts, and I think that's great, and I love it. But McLaren kind of helped me get back to the bedrock of my deepest heart faith in Christ as my Savior, and to not chunk that, and while I'm trying to figure out what family do I really belong in. I actually have come to believe I belong in all of them, that I really have something in common with anyone who calls Jesus their their Lord and Savior, I have kinship with, and however that's lived out.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm just blabbing it out there, you guys. That's kind of where I am, and I can swing from the chandeliers or kneel down and receive communion. We can do it all, and do it all in good faith and with a good conscience. So,
there's a book that I'm reading right now, and I wish I could remember the name of it. But anyway, it talks about what spiritual growth looks like and what the phases of spiritual growth are. And it's in the car. I know it's in the car. But,
we'll wait. You can.
yeah. But it talks about, first comes belief, and then becomes your life of ministry, where you're putting that belief into use. It's flowing out of you, and there can be like self-righteousness kind of lurking behind all of that, because now you think you have the answers and other people don't have. You're more in that either you're in or you're out kind of mindset. There are people who are in
stage one for Brian McLaren.
Yeah.
That's a stage one believer.
Exactly, and then you go through some catastrophe that makes you wonder, well, is any of it true? And then you get reordered. Your
stage
faith
two.
Gets,
Yeah.
And then you graduate into a life of love for everybody, and that just rings true for me, that has to be where we're headed, right? Like, if we are following Jesus, that's where Jesus is going to lead us into a life of love, But I think too, like it's interesting, and again, just where our culture is at right now, I think because of the way the culture wars are heating up, there is this notion running in the background of ideological purity. I mean, if you believe differently than I do, then you don't have anything to say to me, and that kind of ideological purity and theological purity, I just don't think is helpful, and there's an arrogance in it too, right? Because it has to presume that, nope, I already know everything I need to know, and you're wrong, I'm right. But if I'm operating out of that ethos of ideological purity, then I've had a number of people recently, because I released an album called Order, Disorder, Reorder, and that was language that I had heard in an interview with Richard Rohr on a podcast that I listened to, and I thought, oh, that's great language. Now there's, I think he's Baptist, Tallis Willard, right? From he spoke about the same thing. The language that he used was orientation, disorientation, reorientation. Now, writing a song, that's a mouthful,
just
right?
So work. Too many syllables.
So I'm going to use order, disorder, reorder. But because I used that language, some people were like, "Oh, Jason Gray must read Richard Rohr. We're not going to bring him into our church, because he's kind of the heretic du jour, and whether or not he's an actual heretic, I mean, like, that's above my pay grade." Interesting definition of the word heretic, though, comes from N.T. Wright, who said, "A heresy is a truth spoken too loud." And in that case, every denomination is heretical, right?
Yeah.
We all have our thing that we emphasize above other things. But anyway, those places that wanted to cancel Bringing Me because they suspected that I read an author named Richard Rohr is a failure to I mean, I specifically read people I don't completely agree with, because if I read people I don't, who I already agree with, I'm not going to learn anything new. I'm just going to feel affirmed in what I already know, So I'm purposefully reading people on both sides, more conservative, more liberal, who are going to challenge.
But that's what we do, and the brain is really created to pattern algorithms that close out any kind of change.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I mean, we're lucky we learn anything.
I know.
Because our brains, the internet is patterned after the human brain.
Yeah.
That we like. If you look at one Nike ad on your phone, well, for the next 18 days, all you're going to see are Nike ads.
Yeah.
So don't look at anything bad because it's gonna show up again and again and again. But that's patterned after our brains. I've learned this, Jason, that our brains serve up more of what it thinks that we want.
Yeah.
And if that is down one particular ideological or religious kind of, concept or pattern, that's all we're going to get. Right? I mean,
and once you honestly look into all of that, you have a reason to be very suspicious of yourself, which can be very unsettling and anxiety inducing because it feels better emotionally to feel like, no, I got a handle on some things. I'm certain about these things. I'm certain about these other things. But I just don't think that's going to lead us to the truest truths, right? I remember reading that the opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. That was very challenging, But, in terms of confirmation bias, I think the first time that I really began to see this in a real way was in my divorce. I went through a brutal divorce as opposed to one of those really pleasant ones that you hear so much about.
I think they exist. Kind of a holy,
a conscious uncoupling. Yeah, right. No, that's, I don't know about that. I just know that that's not what I experienced. But I remember speaking with my mentor about it, and he brought up about how we see what we've already decided to see.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say a moment ago.
Yeah.
We see what we want to see. Yeah.
And every marriage, your marriage, everyone hearing this, every marriage has enough evidence to warrant burning it all up, but it also has enough evidence to stay in it too. There's evidence of failures. There's evidence of loving kindness, And what we see is based on what we've already decided, which is an interesting experiment to do on yourself, that if you are seeing the world a certain way, that can actually tell you, oh, what have I decided then? Like if I'm angry at my spouse all the time, oh, that might mean that I've made a decision about them that I don't realize I've made, because
that's so good.
We see what
we get more
we've decided to see
of who we are.
That
algorithm.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We're going to see those Nike ads forever because that's what we've decided to see.
Yeah.
So, the thing I love about your music, and I was alluding to this earlier, is that you take these complicated, complex kind of concepts like order, disorder, reorder, and you put it in a freaking song, dude. It's like, okay, who could have done that? Oh, Jason Gray did that.
Oh.
And as I was immersing myself this week in your material again and just reliving the joy of it and admiring your technique, it's almost as if you are surreptitiously teaching me. That's what it feels like. It's like you're teaching me in a sneaky way.
I'm trying to do that.
Right?
That's exactly
where does that come from? Where does that desire to do that come from?
I think it comes from my own desire to escape the bounds of my own self-righteousness and blindness and confirmation bias, right? And the ways that I've been able to see new things that move that. Well, okay. An example is order, disorder, reorder. Whenever I'd go through something really painful, my mind would always go to, oh no, I've done something wrong and God is angry with me and that's why this is happening.
Of course.
Or maybe God doesn't care about my life. Or maybe God doesn't exist. So whenever I'd go through something painful, it would throw me into this drama, this chaos, this anxiety of feeling those things until I got better language. And what I mean by that is, have you ever had this experience where you hear the right word at the right time and all of a sudden it burns away the fog and like, oh, this makes sense to me now, and gives me a new way of seeing things. And that's what happened to me when I heard the words, I'm being transformed as I move from order into disorder into reorder. And that language helped me to have a new category for disorder, because I would say before that, I God was the God of order. He doesn't bring chaos, like all those things that I heard in the church that sound good, but go ask Job how he feels about that, right? Or Jesus, for that matter. But that language gave me a new category where, maybe disorder isn't an evil. Maybe it doesn't mean that something's wrong with me or something's wrong with God or God doesn't exist. Maybe it doesn't mean any of those things. Maybe disorder is just one of those necessary places I have to pass through to get to where I want to go, to be made new, right?
In your own words, dude, I came alive in what the hard times taught me.
Right, yeah.
I mean, just brilliant way to sum up what you're saying there,
I'm trying to write a book right now, and one of the interesting things of that is that I'll wake up in the morning, I'll go out on my deck, and I'll just sit there, and I'll just kind of try to actively remember, and I'll just wait for what rises up in my consciousness, and like, I wonder, I'll take that as a prompting to be curious with the Holy Spirit about, I wonder why that memory came up. One of them was a memory that I hadn't had since I was like 5 years old. And I was a kid. My parents had told me, whatever you do, do not go to bed with gum in your mouth, Jason, And so, of course, I'm like, well, I gotta try going to bed with gum in my mouth to see what the big deal is about, right? And so I remember the night where I snuck a piece of gum in my mouth. I'm hiding it behind my gums. My parents put me to bed. I'm like, I'm so excited to see what's going to happen if I go sleep with gum in my mouth. And I go to sleep, and I wake up in the morning, and it's stuck in the back of my hair, in the back of my head, and I'm trying to get it out, and it becomes clear, like, this isn't coming out, and I start crying because I know I'm busted, and I call my mom, and, and she's like, I told you not to go to the gum. I'm like, I know, I'm so sorry, but if only she had told me, right? If she had told me how risky that was, right? Because what I learned as a 5-year-old that morning was that if you go to bed with gum in your mouth, the gum will start to burrow its way through the flesh and bone of your skull and pop out the back of your head and get caught in your hair. And that's how I believed it worked for longer than I want to admit, And that's because, once we think we've figured something out, we don't think about it anymore, right? We file it away until something happens where we have to reinvestigate it. And so some years down the road, I hadn't, it's like, oh shoot, yeah, I used to think that if you went to bed, it would just burrow through the back of your head. Well, that's crazy. And then I realized, oh no, it's just because it falls out of your mouth and you roll over on it, right? But
great story.
What I learned from all of that as I prayed over it, is that, I got it wrong at first, right, about the gum burrowing its way through the back of my head, However, it was true enough for me at 5 years old. It was true enough to get me to stop going to bed with gum in my mouth, right? And that's useful. And it just had me thinking about, well, this is how we grow, right? I mean, like, I can't expect to know everything when I'm 16 years old, when I first gave my heart to Jesus and began cobbling together a conceptualization of who God is and how he works, and what if I could be humble and say all those first ideas I had at 16, well, maybe they weren't completely true. Maybe they were true enough, though, to get me to 20 years old, where all of a sudden I've got some more maturity, some more life experience, where I open these things up again, and I update my idea of who God is, and that's still not completely true, but it's true enough to get me to 30 years old, and so on and so forth, right? And so it's the best language, and it's imperfect language, but I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, is there a way that I can trust God enough to hold my ideas about him with an open hand and say, Lord, this is what I believe is true, and it's been true enough, but I'm open anytime you want to update me or help me fill in a few of the blanks, or add a little extra color here or there. That strikes me as humble. I'd like to be a humble learner, for sure, in my pursuit of God.
So good. Did you want to do a song for us today?
I'd love to. All right, so this one's called What I Wish for You. It is recorded. It's out there if people want to hear it. Here we go. I hope your heart breaks easily, 'cause you're not afraid to open it for all to see. It gets stronger every time it heals, so I hope you break your heart, and I hope you fall down hard enough that you need the help of a good friend to get back up. 'Cause we all want to know that kind of love, so I hope you fall down hard. It's what I wish for you, what I hope you find. May it all come true in good time. And I hope that failure comes your way and shows you there's a limit to your own strength, till you can't help but offer other people grace. Yeah, I hope that failure comes. It's what I wish for you, what I hope you find. May it all come true. Knowing sometimes good things come from suffering. Yes, sometimes good things can come from suffering. And I hope you can forgive yourself, 'cause if you're like me, you'll probably cause a lot of hell. Maybe one day you can add me to the list as well of what I hope you can forgive. It's what I wish for you, what I hope you find. May it all come true. Child of mine.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the show today. I hope that you'll jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com and check out all the resources there to encourage you in your own songwriting. And if you like what we're doing, why not share this episode out on your socials? You can find the link in the show notes. We'll see you next time.